What if we followed the San Francisco 49ers and Kansas City Chiefs methods of forming their rosters to help remodel the Washington Commanders? That and more coming up on today's episode of Locked On Commanders.
Your daily podcast on the Washington Commanders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome into this episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. This is your daily podcast covering the Washington Commanders. And I want to thank you so much for making Locked On Commanders your first listener, first view today and every day. Don't forget that you can subscribe for free on YouTube or wherever you're listening to this podcast. And you can continue this conversation with me by becoming a Locked On Commanders insider to join subtext.com/Locked On Commanders and sign up today. You'll get news, analysis, one-on-one conversations with me via text message. No hashtags needed, no filters, none of that. All comes straight to your phone. And then you send me your thoughts straight to mine. You get live text also from practices, games, press conferences, events, a whole lot of good things going on over there. So go to joinsubtext.com/Locked On Commanders and text me today. I'm David Harrison, credential member of the media covering the Washington Commanders for CommanderCountry.com, a part of Sports Illustrated's FanNation. I'm here with you every Monday through Friday, along with our everydayers. And as always, everydayers, I appreciate you coming through for today's episode. Today's show is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create your account, use the promo code Locked On to get $20 off your first purchase. On today's episode, we are rebuilding the Washington Commanders roster in the mold of the Kansas City Chiefs and the San Francisco 49ers. So we're going to study what they've done to build their rosters, kind of take a little bit of a mean, a little bit of an average of both of them, and then see what we come up with for the Washington Commanders. I felt like this would be a really fun exercise to go through here in the offseason. It's speculation season, so we don't have a firm grip on what the Commanders are going to do, but we take a look at two of the most successful franchises in the NFL during their time. I know the 49ers just lost the Super Bowl. Kyle Shanahan now has 3 losses, 2 as a head coach under his belt in the big game. But no doubt the San Francisco 49ers, when healthy, have been one of the better and more consistent teams in the National Football League. We kind of went down a rabbit hole here. And at the end of the episode, I'm going to give you a whole new Washington Commanders mock offseason depth chart. So make sure you stick through for that. But how do we make the sausage, right? How did we get there? Well, we got to first start by evaluating the two teams that were in the Super Bowl, the San Francisco 49ers and the Kansas City Chiefs. Kansas City Chiefs, of course, pulling off the win in Super Bowl 58, getting their second championship in a row, going for 3 in a row next year. So we'll start here with the San Francisco 49ers, the NFC representative, because obviously the Washington Commanders, not only do you want to be competitive in the NFC East, but you want to be ultimately competitive in the NFC. And this is the team that you're trying to unseat. Every team in the NFC is trying to unseat the 49ers in 2024. So when you look at their roster and you look at how their roster has been constructed, 55% of their Super Bowl starters came from the NFL draft. You're talking guys like tight end George Kittle, wide receiver Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk, another wide receiver, even quarterback Brock Purdy, linebackers Fred Warner and Drake Greenlaw, who unfortunately Greenlaw suffered that non-contact injury, and hope he gets has a very successful recovery up ahead for him. And then of course defensive end Nick Bosa, among others. 7 of the starters for the San Francisco 49ers in the Super Bowl were free agents. That's 32% of their roster. And you're talking about guys like fullback Kyle Juszczyk, who's been a big part of what the 49ers have done, but did not start his career there. He was added as a free agent at one point in his career. Javon Hargrave, coming over from the Philadelphia Eagles on the defensive line, is another one. And then you have 3 that were brought on through trades. Trent Williams, I know Washington fans, that one's a little bit painful for you, but Trent Williams, Chase Young as well, coming from Washington, and then Christian McCaffrey coming over from the Carolina Panthers. So 10 of your 22 starters for the 49ers were external additions, right? We'll call them. 12 of them were internal drafted players. Then when you look at the rounds, right, the 12 draft picks, 3 of them came from the first round. But then you got 2 from the second and third rounds, respectively. The 5th round has 4 of those starters, and then 1 from the 7th round, that being, of course, Brock Purdy. No starters coming out of the 4th or the 6th rounds of the NFL drafts. So that's 25% of their drafted class coming in the first round of their starters coming from the first round of NFL drafts. 33% of them coming from day 2, but 42% of them coming from day 3. So when you look at the fact that the majority of the 49ers starters came from NFL drafts, and then you look at the majority of those starters who were drafted came from day 3, it just kind of shows you, like, we all get really wrapped up around the first round picks. And of course, there's a reason for it, because the first round, typically you're only getting one crack at the egg on day 1. And So you want that guy to be the best because at the same time, just presumably from the odds, the best players are coming off the board there. But when you look at the San Francisco 49ers as a whole, the entire organization, partially because there's more opportunities to go find players, but also a lot of your starters end up coming from the later days in the NFL draft. So you're looking for the difference makers in the first round, whereas the backbone of your roster is probably coming from days 2 and day 3. We look at the Kansas City Chiefs and look at their roster construction. 16 of their starters at the Super Bowl were drafted. That's 73% of their roster. So a really good organization to try to emulate there for getting and maintaining and growing your own homegrown talent. Really impressive, especially when you consider they traded away guys like Tyreek Hill and are still able to make these things work out. Of course, some of the most popular drafted players in Kansas City: tight end Travis Kelce, quarterback Patrick Mahomes, Isaiah Pacheco, the running back, has become a really famous, popular player among the fan base. Chris Jones, the defensive tackle, is another one. So a lot of talent being drafted by the Kansas City Chiefs. 6 of the starters were free agents. That's only 27% of the starting roster. Left tackle Donovan Smith and safety Mike Edwards, both coming over from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers just this last offseason as well. And then you've got Jawan Taylor, the right tackle, among some others. No traded players on the starting lineup for the Kansas City Chiefs. I thought that was a little bit interesting. But the bottom line is you have 6 external transplants, from outside the team, 10 for the San Francisco 49ers, 6 for the Chiefs. And then when you look at the Kansas City Chiefs, again, you have the 16 draft picks, but even though you have more draft picks on your starting roster, you actually don't have any more first-round picks on the starting roster than the San Francisco 49ers did. So again, the Chiefs have 4 more starters that were drafted by the team, but they both had 3 that were drafted in the first round. For the Chiefs, once you get past the first day, 7 of their picks, 7 of their starters came via draft on day 2, and 6 of them came on day 3. So again, 82% of the Kansas City Chiefs starters that were drafted came on day 2 or day 3. So just another day 1 is sexy. It's amazing. It's exciting. Day 2 and day 3, arguably, at least from a balance and equity ratio, right? Perhaps more important to the success of NFL franchises. So combined, the Kansas City Chiefs, San Francisco 49ers had 28 starters of the 44 on the field on Super Bowl Sunday that came in the draft. 6 of them came in the first round. 11 of them came on day 2. 11 of them came on day 3. So again, 22 of your 44 starters in the Super Bowl were day 2, day 3 draft picks. That's obviously 50%. So 3 starters in the first round, 6 day 2, 6 day 3, 7 starters came via free agency and trades on average. That is our average. So that is how we kind of break down this Washington Commanders roster, right? If we're going to follow the model of these successful teams, that's kind of what you're looking for. You want at least 3 starters to come out of the first round, 6 on day 2, 6 on day 3, and 7 can be external implants, right? That's how we're kind of doing this math today. Again, an exercise in what if, an exercise in trying to follow the mold of those who have done it really well. And then when you look at the combined groups by rounds, looking at the trends, first round, you're typically looking passer, pass rusher, playmaker, pass defender, and interior defensive lineman. I was kind of the surprise there, which the rest of them are no surprise, right? Because it's a passing league. So your passers, your passer, your pass rusher, your pass blocker, your pass coverage, your pass or your playmaker. Those are your key 5 characteristics of a successful football team in the NFL today. You look at San Francisco 49ers, even though they found Brock Purdy in the 7th round, he's been a successful passer for them, certainly a crucial part of their success. Second round, we're usually looking between these 2 teams, you're usually looking at a pass protector, a playmaker, a defensive lineman, and a linebacker. Third round, you're talking playmakers, pass defenders, linebackers. Fourth round, we're looking for pass defenders. 5th round, pass rushers, pass protectors, pass defenders, playmakers, linebackers. 6th round, pass protectors. 7th round, passers, pass protectors, and running back. So that's kind of how these 2 teams have divvied up their draft capital over the years to make their Super Bowl championship team, their Super Bowl caliber teams, rather. The Chiefs obviously winning championships, the 49ers competing. So how does that stack up and compare to the Washington Commanders roster? That's coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And this next segment is brought to you by our sponsor, BetterHelp. Sometimes we all need the opportunity to get something off of our chest, whether it's big or small. Certain things can really start to get to you. It's important to let that out, especially to someone who is unbiased in your life. Sometimes getting overly angry in everyday situations can be a sign of something bigger brewing beneath the surface. And when those things happen, it can be helpful to seek out therapy that can help get to the root of that overreaction before it becomes an even bigger problem. That's what therapy is all about. But therapy can also be different for everyone. Most of us have bigger problems than what's going on with our favorite sports team. And it's important to get those types of things off your chest every once in a while. So if you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be flexible and suited to your schedule. My favorite part is if you don't mesh with your first therapist, you can always switch. No questions asked. Nobody says, but why? Nobody wants you to have any hassle. They do it on your time, on your schedule. So visit betterhelp.com/lockedon to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. Continuing now with today's episode of Locked On Commanders. Thanks again for making Locked On Commanders your first listener, your first view today and every day. Everydayers, come back tomorrow. We will have another episode today as we speak, Thursday, the day this episode is dropping. We are going to be speaking to Cliff Kingsbury, Joe Witt Jr., your new offensive and defensive coordinator for the Washington Commanders, respectively. So tomorrow's episode will be chock full of reactions, clips, and we'll have a conversation about what we talked about with those two coordinators. Come back for that on Friday. Locked On has also launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with your local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. So go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. So we're going to continue now with our dive into what's going to become a Washington Commanders remodel, right? That's something that Dan Quinn talked about in his introductory press conference. He doesn't look at this as a rebuild. I don't remember the exact word he used, but the word I'm using here is remodel, basically taking what you already have and building it towards a championship caliber team. So in order to know where you have to build to, right? Like you can invent the house, certainly, but you look at the houses around you and you say, hey man, that's a really good house over there. The Kansas City Chiefs, they got a really good house. San Francisco 49ers, they got a really good house. So let's look at their blueprints and then let's look at what we already have as a foundation in Washington and say, hey, how do we build a house that competes to the levels of those? So we looked at what the San Francisco 49ers and the Kansas City Chiefs have done over the draft, over free agency, over trades, and how they kind of built their roster, even getting down to the nitty gritty of which position groups are they usually targeting on which days of the NFL draft and all those things. So really just getting a lot of information as much as we can from the way that these two championship caliber teams were developed. And then we take a look at now how that stacks up against the Washington Commanders' current roster. So their current roster, this is the part where everything's going to become more subjective, right? Everything I just gave you, where players were drafted, who was drafted, how many were free agency, those are all facts. Those are all solid numbers and facts that you can take away. This part is going to be a little bit subjective because you have to start with who you believe are your secure starters. Again, we're looking at Super Bowl starting rosters here. So who are your starters if you're the Washington Commanders right now? So to me, you have 6 secured starters. Those 6 players are wide receiver Terry McLaurin, defensive tackle Daron Payne, defensive tackle Jonathan Allen, wide receiver Jahan Dotson, offensive lineman Sam Cosmi, and running back Brian Robinson Jr. Now, that doesn't mean those are the only players I think are good players, right? There's certainly some other good players on this roster, and I'm not counting the guys who have expired contracts right now. So if you're out there screaming, Cam Curl's a solidified starter on this team, what are you talking about? Cam Curl's contract currently is set to expire, so he doesn't equate into what we're talking about here. So if you have 6 secured starters, then you're talking 27% of your starting roster. When you look at offense and defense, 22 starters. So you're talking about 27% of your roster, which means you need 73% of your roster filled out. And what you need to compete for the Washington Commanders roster, as I see it with Dan Quinn taking over, obviously you need a quarterback, you need a running back, you need 5 pass protectors right now. Obviously your offensive linemen, they can also run block. That'd be great. But I think the key to focus in on in the NFL today is your pass protection, right? You obviously need a tight end, and then you need 3 wide receivers in today's NFL to run most offenses. On the defensive side of the ball, you need 2 edge rushers. Sometimes those are defensive ends. Sometimes those are outside linebackers. With Dan Quinn and Joe Witt, I'm looking at them more as outside linebackers. 3 defensive linemen. And so we talk about Daron Payne and Jonathan Allen being defensive tackles. They could slide out to be defensive ends. Really, at the end of the day, you need 3 defensive linemen. You already have 2 of them in Daron Payne and Jonathan Allen. You need 2 linebackers, and you need 4 defensive backs. So when you do the math there, right, we got 2 edge rushers, 3 down linemen, 2 linebackers, 4 DBs. That's exactly 11 people. But we also know that a lot of times 4 DBs isn't enough. You're going to need 5. You're going to need, again, that nickel package. So if you need 5, you're obviously usually taking away from the linebacker position, or you might be taking away from the edge rusher. You might be using a linebacker. That's where versatile linebackers come in, and they can play multiple parts of your defense. So plus minus here or there, depending on exactly how you want to run your scheme. So, but at the end of the day, that's basically what you need to be able to run your football team. And again, we've got 6 of those positions filled out. We've got 2 receivers. And I mean, honestly, some of you might look at Jahan Dotson and say, I don't know that I would call him a secure starter yet. That's why there's a lot of love being spent on, maybe Marvin Harrison Jr. being the number 2 overall pick as well. So either way, we got 2 receivers off the board here. So we're down. We only need 1 more receiver. We've got 2 D linemen off the board. So we only need 1 D lineman, and we've got 1 offensive lineman off the board. So we need 1 or 4 offensive linemen, and then our running back, Brian Robinson Jr. So we don't need a running back. So to fill out our starting roster, right, with 16 positions left, you need the quarterback, 4 pass protectors, tight end, wide receiver, 2 edge rushers, a D lineman, 2 linebackers, 4 DBs to build out the rest of this starting roster. And you have 9 draft picks to go ahead and flesh that out with. So 9 draft picks. You need 7 free agent additions if you're going to fill all 16 of those spots. And look, we're doing this by the book. We're doing this by the Chiefs and Niners script, right? So that's the same percentage of outside personnel brought in, the same percentage draft capital. So we're going to kind of keep it there. Now, are we expecting our 9 draft picks, all of them to start? No, that's not really realistic, but we're trying to look at how these things are going to get built. So that's how we're going to kind of bookend ourselves here, right? Every experiment has to have rules and has to have conditions, right? So those are our conditions. 9 draft picks, which means we can bring 7 players from the outside into the organization. Of the 16 external additions made by Super Bowl teams, 5 of them were offensive linemen. So half your starters in the Super Bowl on the offensive line were external imports, free agents or trades, right? So that's half of them. So you would think that in the NFL, with the offensive line being so important, that would probably be a homegrown entity. It actually isn't. Again, half of that group came from free agent signings or trades. 4 DBs, mostly safeties, came from external moves. 3 D linemen, 2 running backs, 1 of the wide receivers, and 1 of the linebackers. All of those came from external needs. So when we look at that, we look at O linemen, DBs, D linemen, running backs, wide receivers, linebackers. Washington has 7 external needs. I've got some free agents that I'm kind of adding to this Washington Commanders roster. This is where we start our first part of rebuilding this Commanders roster in the light of the Chiefs and the San Francisco 49ers. So of those 7 players, 2 offensive linemen, I'm looking at right tackle Jonah Williams, who's expected to earn $10.8 million a year on average on a 4-year deal. And I'm looking at center Aaron Brewer, who's expected to earn $5.2 million on a new 3-year deal. Defensive back, I'm going a little bit luxury here, guys. I'm going a little bit rich. And honestly, I don't expect him to actually escape the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, but they do have a lot of players to sign. They got to sign their quarterback. They got to sign wide receiver Mike Evans. So if somehow Antoine Winfield Jr. hits the open market as a free safety, he's a very versatile. They call him a free safety on Spot Track, but really he's just a football player, man. I would love to see the Washington Commanders pursue Antoine Winfield Jr. He's projected to make $18.4 million on a new 5-year deal. Defensive line, I'm going front 7 on here. So I'm going Zadarius Smith, who's actually an outside linebacker, but front 7 right, is what we're looking for here. $12.4 million on a 2-year deal. 1 running back. We already got Brian Robinson Jr., but you obviously need a second fiddle. If you're not bringing Antonio Gibson back, we're going to go Kareem Hunt, $4.5 million over 2 years, or for 2 year average for 2 years. Wide receiver, I've talked about him already on this show every day, as you're going to recognize his name, Mecole Hardman. Yes, the guy who caught the game-winning pass in the Super Bowl. No, that's not why I'm talking about him. I've talked about him before, but Mecole Hardman, elite speed, ability. I think that there's a lot more to be left to tap into his talent than what we've seen so far in his career. $4 million for 1 year. And, of course, linebacker Patrick Queen. I think he could be the crown jewel of the free agent class if the Washington Commanders are allowed or able to peel him away from the Baltimore Ravens. $18.5 million per year for 5 years. Now, think about free agent contracts, right? Like, so those are averages, right? Antoine Winfield Jr., $18.4 million per year on average over 5 years. Doesn't mean he's actually going to make $18.4 million against the cap in year 1, right? You can be flexible with that contract and how the money gets doled out and all that stuff. But if you were to take all these contracts, which some of them are pretty high, just at face value per year, that's what you count for, you still have about $10 million left for the Washington Commanders in cap space. And that's before you do any restructuring, any releasing, anything like that. So even though we have a little bit of a rich free agent pool here, right? Jonah Williams, not cheap. Antoine Winfield Jr., Zadarius Smith, Patrick Queen. Even though we kind of go a little bit on the rich end, we still have the $10 million that we need to sign our draft class. And I did that on purpose. I'm not saying the Washington Commanders are going to sign all of these, top names in their position groups of free agent contracts, but it just kind of shows you that the Washington Commanders can be as aggressive as they want to be this offseason in free agency to bring in those 7 external additions to try to build the start of a championship roster. So after those 7 guys, though, we still got 9 draft needs that we need to fill. We need a quarterback. We need 2 pass protectors, tight end, edge rusher, linebacker. We need 3 DBs. So we're going to go find those with a mock draft here on Thursday. Coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode of Locked On Commanders is brought to you by Game Time, who says that you shouldn't have to worry when you buy tickets to your next big event. Game Time is the fast and the easy way to buy tickets for all your sports, music, comedy, and theater near you. They've got killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their best price guarantee. Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. My wife and I have begun planning our spring and summer event schedule, and using Game Time has made the process of deciding which events to attend, how to prioritize them, all those things. Whether or not we're confident to buy the seats, it's made it an entire breeze. Game Time is the only ticketing app that gives you complete peace of mind with your purchase, and the Game Time guarantee means you'll always get the best price. So if you find tickets in the same show, same section, same row for less money, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create your account, and use the promo code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create your account, redeem the code LOCKEDON, LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Wrapping up today's episode of Locked On Commanders, going down the rabbit hole here. I took a look at the Chiefs roster, took a look at the Niners Super Bowl rosters, their Super Bowl starters, took a dive into how they've acquired these starters, where they built the most through draft tendencies, all that stuff. And we're applying those metrics to the Washington Commanders roster. And again, we're staying very strict inside those metrics to just kind of demonstrate the point, right? We started with our secure starters. We only had 6 of them. You might have more. I understand, a lot of you want to give Sam Howell the opportunity to start again for the second season. I'm not against that. Let's just be clear right up front. I am not against any way, shape, or form Sam Howell getting the opportunity to start again this season, and especially for Dan Quinn and for Cliff Kingsbury. But just being a football realist of the way that the business tends to work, when you don't have a guy that you're cemented with, typically teams go out there pursuing other quarterback options, not to necessarily replace, but at least to bring in competition. So I'm just being real with you. I just believe that the Washington Commanders are going to bring in competition for Sam. So that's the way that we're going to execute this. And that's it. So again, it's not because I hate Sam. It's not because I don't like him. It's not because I don't think he has the ability. It's just because I think that the team is going to bring in competition for him. And quite honestly, that competition is probably going to come via the NFL draft, and that's where we are now. We signed some free agents here, right? Jonah Williams, Aaron Brewer, Antoine Winfield Jr., Zadarius Smith, Kareem Hunt, McCole Hardman, Patrick Queen. A very rich, a very talent-heavy, a very expensive free agent class. Again, wanted to demonstrate to you all out there, this team can be as aggressive as they want. Doesn't mean they're going to go spend $80 million like I just did in cap space, but they certainly can if they really want to and if they can get the right players to sign those deals. But it leaves us with 9 draft picks. We've got $10 million in the bank, which is about what you need to cover a draft class. So we're good there. Don't have to worry about anything. And we haven't even made any restructures or released anybody to save some cap room. So we're still good there. And again, we need 2 pass protectors. Again, quarterback for at least competition for Sam Howell, tight end, edge rusher, linebacker, and 3 defensive backs. So when we talk about these position players, and we talked about, the position trends that the Chiefs and the 49ers have followed, we're kind of following that. And I understand that Brock Purdy was a 7th round pick. But let's be honest, you can't draft quarterbacks in the 7th round expecting them to be your full-blown starters. It's just not how this tends to work. So we start with the 1st round. We have the number 2 overall pick. I'm actually going to start this thing with a trade, right? So I'm going to trade that number 2 overall pick to number 3 to the New England Patriots. They're going to trade up and grab the quarterback that they like the most after Caleb Williams goes to Chicago Bears. I'm going to get pick number 34 in exchange. So I now have 3 second-round picks in the 2024 NFL draft. They take Drake May. So at number 3, I'm taking quarterback Jaden Daniels out of LSU. In the 2nd round, we've got picks number 34, 36, and 40. And judging from the Chiefs and the 49ers histories, trenches is typically where we go with these 2 championship caliber teams. So at 34, I'm getting a left tackle and Troy Fautanu out of Washington. 36, we're going defensive line heavy with Chris Jenkins out of Michigan. And number 40, we're going offensive tackle Kieran Megaje out of Yale to be probably our right tackle, right? Shift him over to right tackle. 3rd round, we come back with 2 more picks, number 67, number 100. 101, depending on how the whole thing breaks down. But either way, right around that area, right? Third round, 67. We're typically finding our support roles here. We're going linebacker, Edgerrin Cooper, and we're going tight end, Cade Stover out of Ohio State. Now, typically, this is where I end my mock drafts, right? Compensatory picks have not been awarded yet, so all of these picks are going to get shifted down. But for the purpose of this experiment, this exercise, I did want to go ahead and flesh it out. So fourth round, number 103, we come back and we go defensive back again. The Chiefs and the 49ers, the only starters coming out of the fourth round were all defensive backs. So we go cornerback Kalen King out of Penn State. Fifth round, number 138, we're going with another defensive back, Bo Braid out of Maryland. He's more of a nickel type coverage safety. Sixth round, number 181, we're going edge, Jalen Harrell out of Michigan. So we get another edge rusher to go with Zadarius Smith and the guys we already have on the roster. Seventh round, number 220, we're going safety again, Kenny Logan Jr. out of Kansas, who is more of a box safety. So again, now here we have our revamped Washington Commanders depth chart for you. And according to this experiment, following the Kansas City Chiefs and San Francisco 49ers blueprints, your quarterback, Jayden Daniels or Sam Howell, I like a competition there. I want to see who the best man for the job is. Hopefully that's what the Washington Commanders end up doing. Running backs, Brian Robinson Jr. and Kareem Hunt. Wide receivers, Terry McLaurin, Jahan Dotson, McCole Hardman. Tight ends, Logan Thomas, Cade Stover, John Bates. Left tackle, you've got Troy Fatanu. Left guards, Stromberg or Nick Gates. I like Nick Gates to move back over to guard. We'll see what the Commanders decide to do. Obviously, he is certainly a cut candidate as well. Ricky Stromberg, certainly not a cemented starter in there, but I like what we saw from him during the part of the season we got to see him. Your center is Brewer. Your guard is Sam Cosmi. Your right tackle is Jonah Williams. So right there, we've got a couple of guys drafted, a couple of free agent additions to go with the guys that are already established on our roster. Defensive tackles, you got Jenkins out of Michigan. Then we got Fedarian Mathis and John Ridgeway. Defensive ends, Deron Payne and John Allen. Outside linebackers, Zadarius Smith, KJ Henry, Andre Jones Jr. Inside linebackers, Patrick Queen, Jamin Davis, and Edgerrin Cooper are rookie. Cornerbacks, Benjamin St. Juste, Emmanuel Forbes, and Quan Martin. I'm moving him back down to the nickel because Antoine Winfield Jr. is coming in to be our free safety. And Derek Forrest, I'm making him our quote-unquote strong safety, although today's NFL safeties are basically just safeties, and those guys play wherever they need to be played. So we're not filling every need, right? You can't possibly, especially with you're talking day 3 picks, all these stuff. So where are remaining soft spots? Outside linebacker potentially could be another soft spot, or could be a remaining soft spot, right? We like Zadarius Smith, obviously the crafty veteran, KJ Henry, Andre Jones Jr. certainly showing some potential last season in their rookie years, but again, not solidified guys. What about Chase Young? Right. What about bringing Chase Young back to Washington? Look, I don't know who all Chase Young may or may not have had conflict with in the Washington Commanders organization, who he feels salty towards for the trade and all that stuff and the way that things went down. But if his beef is with Ron Rivera and Jack Del Rio specifically, well, they ain't here no more. So maybe he wants to come back home. I don't know. Jason Campbell, I was recently on an episode of In the Minute podcast with Donna and Tony McGee, and Jason Campbell kind of brought it up. I kind of like the idea. I'm not going to lie to you. If Chase Young is hungry to get back to the Super Bowl and wants to do it back home, maybe he comes in. And I've always liked him better standing up anyway. So make him an outside linebacker with Zadarius Smith, Chase Young, KJ Henry, and Andre Jones Jr. I think it's a pretty solid group. Cornerbacks, I know a lot of you are not going to be happy that Benjamin St. Juste, Emmanuel Forbes are still your starting corners. I understand that completely. But what I'm hoping here is that a more aggressive pass rush up front, better pass rush up front, maybe helps make those cornerbacks' jobs a little bit easier. Center, there's a question mark. We're bringing in a free agent, but we have obviously no assurances or guarantees it's going to work out. Same thing with left guard, going with the combination of Ricky Stromberg or Nick Gates. Is that going to work out the way that you wanted to? Wide receiver, McCole Hardman may not move the needle for some of you as much. And then obviously quarterback situation. Some of you are going to be really happy that I grabbed Jayden Daniels. Some of you are going to be mad that I didn't just let Sam have it. Some of you are going to be mad that I traded out and missed on Drake May. It is what it is. We all have our opinions. It's great. But that's been our experiment, man. And again, I had a lot of fun running down the rabbit hole on this one. Hopefully you had a lot of fun going down it with me. So that's just kind of looking at the Chiefs, looking at the Niners, the way they built their 2 rosters and how Washington could potentially follow that blueprint to build a competing roster themselves. Coming up tomorrow, we will have reactions from Cliff Kingsbury and Joe Witt Jr.'s introductory press conferences, offense coordinator, defense coordinator, Washington Commanders. So make sure you come back for that. In the meantime, if you got questions or comments, throw them down in the YouTube comment section. Text me directly by becoming a Locked On Commanders insider at joinsubtext.com/LockedOnCommanders. Insiders, if you want the blueprint that I just did with the Chiefs and Niners, let me know. And if you want to build your own team based on those kind of bookends, I'd definitely be interested in seeing what you guys put together. Don't forget to also check out Locked On Sports Today, the first ever 24/7 live streaming sports channel on YouTube. As always, thank you for making Locked On Commanders your first listen of the day every day. Thanks for coming through on a regular basis like you do. And until we speak again, please, if you're out and about, please be safe, be kind. I'll see you next time for another episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.